Hello. All right. Good morning again to our speakers and distinguished guests from the government, the private sector, the academe, and think tanks. I am Joyce Reyes. I am the Communications and Advocacy Director of the Strat-Based Institute, and I will also be your host for today. Welcome to today's forum on advancing energy security, fueling sustainable progress with liquefied natural gas. So this event is organized by the Strat-Based Institute in partnership with Citizen Watch Philippines. This is a hybrid event, so to everyone who are here with us at the Asian Institute of Management Conference Center, thank you very much for joining us today. And we are also live via Zoom, so those who are tuned in, thank you very much. So today we are gathering key stakeholders from the government, private sector, academe, and civil society to explore ways to boost LNG adoption and accelerate the development of the industry in the Philippines. This event aims to gain insights into the diverse challenges and opportunities linked to incorporating LNG, contributing to the establishment of a stable and reliable power supply to attain energy security in the country. So to formally start our program for today, let us all welcome Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, President of the Strat-Based Institute, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Joyce. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to our forum on securing the future, leveraging the LNG investments for a sustainable future. This is my point of discussion. Just to give a little background, in Strat-Based, every year we try to identify what we consider as geostrategic outlook for the Philippines. And it comes with what we call risks. But for the Filipinos, some might see risk as negative, but in our case, we tend to look at it as opportunities. And today, I'd like to focus on our clean energy transition, the push for decarbonization and the transformation of what I call the global economic order. Nearly a year and a month ago, I think in the Center for Strategic and International Studies, I read and even heard the President use this line: economic security is national security. And that struck me in Strat-Based, especially when I connected it with one of his lines or key points in his State of the Nation address. But before I go into those points of our president, allow me to share how I view the world. They say that the world will be driven by this region called Indo-Pacific, or the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And since then, I saw the map differently when I started following this idea. At the center of it is our archipelago. When you look at our archipelago, you see what we call today as West Philippine Sea as an important waterway for trade, commerce, and even supply of oil and gas. When you look even at the archipelago, they even say that it's in archipelago where it passes some data flows. Even Meta, after 6 years of project initiative in the Philippines, have launched a submarine cable from the west coast, entering Aurora and exiting through La Union. So you see that importance. But key to that importance is to understand it really from energy security, from supply chain, from green transition. And as I've said earlier, our president, in his first State of the Nation address, spoke of the use of renewable energy at the top of our climate agenda. But is it really possible? Can we really jump automatically to clean energy and decarbonize? And related to this is the challenge of the climate crisis. We prefer to be on top of any ranking, but not this ranking that I'm quoting, the climate risk ranking. We have seen it, we have seen ourselves rise through the years, even number one. And this is where the need really to move to clean energy, decarbonize, side by side with energy security is important. And I took note of what Bloomberg wrote, that we rank fourth among the most attractive emerging markets for renewable energy. And our own survey reflected that Filipinos support clean energy. When you look at these numbers, 85% find it important for us to use clean energy. And we saw our own Department of Energy coming out with their plans, where we are in 2022, and now to move it to stronger renewable energy share. But that kind of reality brings us to how do we transition? You see this data coming from our own Department of Energy, and you know that the Philippines needs natural gas to meet power demand while enabling the transition into renewable energy. And this move is projected to facilitate energy security. What brought us today here is an invitation I got from the Department of Defense of the United States. I was asked to speak in a conference on energy security last April, right? A week and a half after the visit of our president. And the audience was basically the different defense, security, and energy establishment of the U.S. And they're really concerned where we are. And of course, as a strategically important ally. But we see good news, no? When we see private sector working together. Then you see our own legislators pushing for the Philippine Downstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act, which will be, if not for the Senate change of leadership, would have been debated in the floor. So now it's a little delayed, but it will be one of the first part of the agenda come July, after the State of the Nation address. It was meant to have been sponsored on the day of the coup in the Senate that changed the leadership. But hopefully, we will see it moving forward, and we'll see an enabling legislation to push this. I wanted to share one of our survey results also. That when we ask Filipinos, as we see this geostrategic reality that we're living in, who should we work with? Critical here is our allies, not only for purposes of defense, but even for purposes of economic. That's why for this session today, we have invited friends from ExxonMobil, even friends from Angea, or the Association of Natural Gas. They'll be broadcasting from Singapore. This type of relationship, this type of like-mindedness allows us also to think that there's a security impact to our energy challenges. Just yesterday, right on the eve of our forum, I published in my regular Philippine Daily Inquirer commentary, and I said, faced with energy challenge, the Philippine legislators have proposed the Philippine Downstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act. It emphasizes natural gas as a cleaner and more effective, cost-effective energy source. But parallel to legislative efforts by Congress, there's always the opportunity for the private sector to work in closer collaboration with the government to jumpstart this industry. I'm actually describing the forum today. We wanted to bring people here, small forum, but hopefully it can evolve into a bigger one before the end of the year, to continue this discussion. In Strat-based, we have always believed, as we deal with the reality of geopolitics, some would say deglobalization, de-risking, decoupling, it takes a whole of society approach, where our government sets an enabling environment to their policy initiative, working with the private sector, and even in the international community, to attain and address our national interests in the Philippines. And our national interest for today's forum is our own energy security as we transition into a greener economy. Good morning to all who participated, and those in Zoom, thank you for joining us even online.
Thank you very much, Professor Manhit, for that insightful introduction and for setting the stage for today's discussions. So for the keynote address, we are honored to have the Vice Chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy. Unfortunately, though, he cannot be physically present today because of some important commitments. But he did prepare a special recorded message for all of us today. So please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. Let's all listen in to his message.
Strat-based ADR Institute President Dindo Manhit, speakers, guests, and stakeholders of this conference, a pleasant day to you all. The collaborative efforts of the public and private sectors are crucial in embracing cleaner energy sources like liquefied natural gas, which not only promises a cleaner future, but also ensure a robust and secure energy framework for the Philippines. In fact, we filed the Midstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act, which aims to fill in the gaps and strengthen existing bridge policies to unlock the potential of natural gas as a vital source of energy for the country. This proposed measure allows private sector participation across the entire value chain and provides flexibility for the government to adapt to evolving market conditions, among other provisions. Let us support this endeavor to fuel sustainable progress and make a lasting impact on the nation's energy independence. Let's win this together.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Gatchalian. So at this point, we have another very special recorded message from the Secretary of the Department of Energy, Honorable Rafael P.M. Lotilla. He would have wanted to join us here today, but unfortunately, he has a conflict in his schedule as well. So in his message, he will talk about the significance of LNG in our energy landscape. So let's all listen to Secretary Lotilla.
Good morning to all, and thank you to Staff News Group for this opportunity to speak before your esteemed guests, to share the government's mission and initiatives in promoting the adoption of liquefied natural gas in the Philippines. The country continues to utilize a significant amount of fossil fuels, which account for two-thirds of the country's total primary energy supply, with coal and oil dominating our utilization. The share of renewable energy in the home comprises the remaining third. Given the limited domestic production of indigenous fuels such as natural gas and coal, more than half of the Philippines' energy requirements are imported, making us vulnerable to global price fluctuations. Recognizing this challenge, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has emphasized energy security as a key priority, and highlighted in his 2023 State of the Nation. He emphasized that renewable energy is the way forward, with the government setting its ambitious goal of 35% renewable energy share in the power generation mix by 2030 and 50% by 2030. To accelerate this green energy transition, the government open renewable energy projects to full foreign ownership and investments, as well as issued mechanisms to accelerate the development of renewable. To balance variable renewable energy, the government is pursuing a robust natural gas market. On the upstream, the renewal of the Malampaya service contract period until 2031 was signed by the President, extending production from this indigenous field. The national government also agreed with the Downstream autonomous region to the Muslim Mindanao, or WAM, to tap into promising energy sites in the WAM area. In other areas of the country, two service contractors have finished their seismic survey of 1,500 square kilometers each in the CUC in Eastern Palawan and in Northwest Palawan. Evaluation results will be out in 2018. Aligned with Presidential Decree 87, the Philippine Conventional Energy Contracting Program, DOE, has a comprehensive package of incentives specifically tailored to boost investments in oil and gas exploration and production activity. These incentives are intended to serve as catalysts to accelerate investments across the entire value chain and exploration to development and production. Successful exploration and production activities will not only contribute to the country's energy security goals, but also drive economic growth, create employment opportunities, and generate revenue streams. Ultimately, the Filipino people will be benefited. Exploration and development of these resources, including the building of necessary infrastructure, will certainly take time, making it essential to have a reliable energy transition source in the meantime. And this is where LNG plays a crucial role, serving as a cleaner substitute for traditional fossil fuels. The Philippine Energy Plan 2023 to 2050 outlines a comprehensive strategy to strengthen our energy sector. This plan also supports the development of the downstream natural gas industry, including LNG as a transition fuel to provide reliable baseload power. With the PEP, we aim to strengthen the enabling environment for investments and innovation in LNG, ensuring a reliable and premium energy supply for the Philippines. Two LNG facilities have been constructed in Batangas to support the operations of First Gas and Ilihan Power Plant. Both complement each other and can support around 8,000 megawatts capacity of natural gas plants. The DOE has likewise issued 4 permits to construct and 3 notices to proceed with LNG proposals as of May this year, as well as issued the amended Philippine Downstream natural gas regulations to support the exploration and development of indigenous natural gas and prioritize its utilization for attaining energy security. The journey towards energy security and sustainability, however, must be a collaborative effort. We thank the members of Congress who have championed enabling policies like the proposed Philippine Downstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act. The DOE is also formulating a National Gas Development Plan to provide investments, guidance, and policy, legal requirements, and incentives in putting up LNG facilities and other infrastructure projects, including our future development plans and programs. We call on the support of our stakeholder and partners in the private sector to assist us in creating a resilient, self-reliant, and sustainable energy future for the Philippines. Thank you, and a good morning to all.
Thank you very much, Secretary Lotilia, for your valuable insights. And to further delve into the topic of energy security, we have another special message from the Department of Energy, this time from Undersecretary Sharon Garin. She will speak about the role of LNG in ensuring energy security in the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to the message of USEC Garin.
Distinguished delegates, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to all of you. Energy security is of paramount importance in the Philippines for several reasons. First is economic growth. Energy security is vital to supporting economic growth targets of 6.5% to 7.5% in 2024 and 6.5% to 8% in 2025 to 2028. All the way to reaching a potential of becoming $1 trillion economy by 2031. The Department of Energy projects that the electricity demand will increase by 6.6% every year until 2040. A secure and reliable power supply is crucial to meet this growing demand. Most importantly, energy security is not just about ensuring a steady supply of energy, but also making sure that this energy is sustainable, affordable, and accessible to all Filipinos. It plays a crucial role in the country's economic growth, social development, and transition to a cleaner energy future. The LNG outlook of the Philippines is very promising. Though LNG is a fossil fuel, but the cleanest against oil and coal. LNG importation and regasification terminal will be needed in view of the expected drop in indigenous natural gas supply coming from our domestic Malampaya gas field. LNG will provide the natural gas requirement of the existing 3,200 megawatts gas-fired power plants. Based on the Philippine Energy Plan, the Philippines will need additional natural gas power capacity under clean energy scenario of around 3,867 megawatts by 2040 and 15,989 megawatts in 2050, and LNG can play a role in either from where demand is being required considering that natural gas technology is versatile. Also, LNG is projected to provide the ancillary capacity to support intermittent RE capacity by 72% in 2040 and 74% in 2050 under a clean energy scenario. LNG powered plants can adjust output rapidly, complementing intermittent renewable energy sources like solar and wind, thus ensuring grid flexibility. LNG can also provide the much cheaper fuel for the off-grid or missionary islands by replacing the existing diesel-fired power plants estimated to be at a suppressed capacity of 500 megawatts or more. And LNG will primarily be consumed in the power sector as its anchor market, but will soon cover non-power applications such as in the industrial processes, transportation, commercial, and even residential sectors. And to meet all of these demands, the Philippines initially required 5 metric tons per annum or MTPA. Furthermore, the Philippines, like many countries, has recognized the potential of LNG as a bridge fuel toward a more sustainable energy future. The Department of Energy recognizes the benefits of LNG in diversifying and securing the country's energy needs. LNG provides the flexibility to support various grid demands, from base load to peaking power supply, as well as bridge the supply gap resulting from the moratorium on new coal power plants and retirement of existing coal capacities. However, we noted the sluggish development of LNG projects in the country, but the implementation of the amended Department Circular that spelled out the rules and regulations for Philippine downstream natural gas industry, it has provided transparent guidelines to the potential investors as well as to provide a conducive environment towards the promotion and development of the Philippine downstream natural gas industry value chain. To date, the Department of Energy has issued 7 permits to interested companies to put up the LNG terminal, and 2 projects are expected to have commercial operation of its LNG terminal this 2024. So that the country is ready to commercially import LNG when our domestic supply source will start to deplete its gas reserve or fill the gap when the new gas field has yet to be discovered and commercially produce natural gas. Our government firmly believes in the crucial role of the natural gas in our overall energy mix and policy. The flexibility nature of LNG or natural gas could readily respond to the growing power requirements of the country as well as address concerns on climate change and in the reduction of CO2 emissions. As the Philippines is aiming to be an LNG consumer and working towards a cleaner energy mix, the country can achieve its energy security objectives as we recognize the importance of collaboration and cooperation between producers and consumers with our robust experiences and best practices in the LNG industry. The Philippines can take advantage from these experiences. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and mabuhay po kayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Yusek Garin. So at this point, we will hear about the use of natural gas as a transition fuel for electric cooperatives from the administrator of the National Electrification Administration, or NEA. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Antonio Almeda. A round of applause, please.
Thank you. Before I begin, I would like to thank our friend Ido Manhit, President of StatBase, for inviting me over. I feel nervous about sitting with all these stakeholders, but it is humbling to be part of this distinguished project legal luminaries like my boss, Secretary Popo Lipilla of the Department of Energy, and likewise the chairman of the National Electrification Administration, my colleague under Secretary Sharon Garin in the energy industry, of course, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, whose remarkable stint as Senate Energy Committee Chair I will always hold with admiration and with deep respect. Of course, the presence of Attorney Kit Belmonte, whose personal passion and commitment are legendary. And with Professor Maha Lea Rabago and our friends at the Development Academy of the Philippines, our partners, are quiet yet steady source of clarity, knowledge, and guidance. And of course, the other stakeholders from Exxon and the others, Boitis and MGen. Talking about advancing energy security and fueling sustainable progress with LNG is beyond timely. It is in fact already quite late in the day, as we are now at a very critical stage in the country's energy transition, which is already significantly behind global trends. In short, there is much work ahead for all of us. Significant investments have already been made in the LNG field, with some having in fact achieved commissioning, some more seamless than others, I have gathered. But regardless, we must all come together to enable these investments, because this will all be undeniably critical building blocks to the long-term Philippine energy security. We must enable them all equally, without fear or favor, and not hinder them. We must work with them, not against them. We must find solutions and not create or be part of the problem. It is only by doing so that we will be able to encourage others to make similar investment decisions for us to truly, as this forum envisions, boost LNG adoption and accelerate the development of the energy industry in the Philippines. And only then we can truly advance energy security, partly by fueling sustainable progress with LNG. This relevantly, the Philippine Energy Plan of 2020 to 2040, as discussed by Yusek Sharon Garin and Sec Lutilla, or the Philippine Energy Plan, has projected the Philippines' total installed capacity by year 2040 to reach 95.7 gigawatts under the business as usual scenario. Ordinarily, this forecasted growth in installed power capacity would entail a sharp increase in the country's carbon emissions. Assuming that we continue to rely on existing power plant technologies that we have today, which is currently dominated by coal-fired power plants. Based on the NEA's available data for electric cooperatives' power supply agreements as of 2023, it shows a heavy reliance on coal technology as primary resource for electricity, followed by hybrid technologies, which encompasses mixed technologies such as combination of hydro, coal, and other technologies. This significantly portrays that coal technology is the major resource for power generation due to its abundance and economic viability. However, coal is also noted to be less viable in terms of environmental impact. Therefore, the DOE's program to transition to lesser carbon-intensive resources is essential to mitigate negative impacts of power generation and move towards a more sustainable and ecological energy system. This reality is also recognized in the Philippine Energy Plan, which envisions that the Philippines' dependable installed capacity of renewable to be at least 35% in 2030 and to 50% by 2040. This is further in line with our commitment to the rest of the world, particularly under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. However, I know that this is easier said than done, there being a number of issues first to be addressed. First, renewable energy alone cannot support the nation's base load demand for electricity. While a totally green energy program is ideal, we must be practical. Our current renewable energy technology is only as dependent as the availability of resources. Solar panels can only generate electricity when exposed to adequate sunlight. Windmills can generate electricity only with the presence of enough wind. Second, the intermittent nature of renewable energy is likewise a culprit for energy gaps and fluctuation in the grid's voltage, which need to be addressed and balanced. Considering these factors and consistent with the Philippine Energy Plan, we at NEA join the President and the DOE's view that natural gas can serve as a viable transition fuel to address these concerns for a number of reasons. Power plants running on natural gas are capable of serving baseload power, as mentioned by Yusek Garin, or the continuous supply of electricity and peaking power, which can be activated quickly to meet sudden spikes in demand that will ensure consistent available of electricity. These power plants are also acknowledged for their capability to ramp up and down their electricity output as may be needed by the grid. Therefore, they serve as an ideal match for renewable energy technology like solar and wind, which are highly intermittent and very erratic. Natural gas is viable as a transition fuel also because it emits 60% less carbon dioxide than coal plants. It has less hazardous byproducts like sludge, ash, and other materials that may be harmful to health and damaging to the environment. Perhaps most importantly, natural gas has not been seen to be as cheap, but if not cheaper, than coal as a fuel price. We must also not discount the fact that our country has been blessed with our indigenous source of natural gas, the Malampaya gas plant. Historically, our own national policy has recognized the importance of developing this valuable source. As early as 1972, former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. issued Presidential Decree Number 87 as the All Exploration and Development Act of 1972 to hasten the discovery and production of indigenous petroleum through the utilization of government and or private resources, both local and foreign. Since then, other frameworks have sought to develop the potential of natural gas for purposes of energy security and resiliency. And now, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. signed the renewal agreement for the Malampaya Service Contract Number 38, otherwise known or commonly known as SE38, which should allow for the continued production of the Malampaya gas field, ensuring that the remaining gas reserves are further explored and utilized. The use of natural gas in the energy industry requires long-term and sustainable thinking, planning, and solutions, those that cannot and should not be compartmentalized into present and future administrations. Consumer welfare goes beyond the price of power for the day. It involves the issue of reliability, because electricity that fluctuates erratically damages gadgets, appliances, and equipment that our consumers pay for dearly. It involves availability because the most expensive power is the power that is not there. We understand that in order to take full advantage of natural gas as a transition fuel, there's a need for substantial investment in this field. Again, the Philippine Energy Plan envisions for natural gas-fired power plants to increase in installed capacity to roughly 24,000 megawatts by 2040. With this, we have to be realistic from a business standpoint. Our government will be hard-pressed to support this endeavor alone. That is why the NEA has long been studying how to support natural gas as a viable transition fuel by being able to provide and develop a secure market to promote the use of natural gas for power generation. That is why the NEA fully supports the adoption of natural gas as a transition fuel. I must stress at this point that in trying to do so, we are not in any way killing the market of coal power plants or those that run on any other kind of technology for that matter. We firmly believe that there's room in the market to not only support this initiative, but also support the existing market as well. In this sense, we at NEA, together with the 121 electric cooperatives, are confident in furthering the formulation and implementation of policy of support of the DOE's direction of developing natural gas as a viable transition fuel. The NEA, as a matter of policy, is prepared to provide this ready market to develop natural gas. Of the 17 regions, 16 of which, or 94%, are serviced by electric cooperatives. We have 148 cities nationwide, 91 of which, or 61%, are serviced by electric cooperatives. Of the 1,486 municipalities, 1,386 or 93% are serviced by electric cooperatives. And of the 42,027 barangays nationwide, 36,064 or 86% are serviced by electric cooperatives. With that, the NEA is continuing to develop their capacity to receive and take advantage of natural gas power plants in their franchise areas, in line with this national policy. The continued development and support of our ECs is crucial as their performance directly translates into the energy quality and requirements of most of our countrymen. By enhancing EC's capabilities and performance, they can better serve and empower their member consumer owners. This includes providing higher quality services, improving efficiency, adopting innovative solutions, and best practices that meet international standards. Most importantly, having a ready supply of reliable energy. We are no longer content with our ECs or electric cooperatives being competitive locally, but we stress that they must be competitive internationally as well. I must stress further that this is a declared state policy. The President himself has stated that in the move to lowering our carbon footprint caused by energy production, our advancement to renewables will have a lead time. In the interim, natural gas will hold the key. Natural gas will enable wind and solar energy. Wind and solar are cleaner sources of energy, but the power that these generate are again still highly intermittent and very erratic, and will likely remain so until relevant technologies, including energy storage, further improves. As it is, the influx of renewable energy requires increased ancillary services that can only come from traditional technologies, fossil fuels, geothermal, and hydro. Other industries have followed suit. The Bank of Philippine Islands has put in place what they refer to as a coal policy, which states that effective June of 2021, the PPI Group shall have no additional commitments to finance greenfield coal power generation projects. In addition, BPI also approved the outstanding loans of BPI Group to coal power generation shall be reduced to 50% of current exposure by 2026 and zero by 2032, ahead of the Paris Climate Change Agreement target for the non-OECD countries. BDO recently followed suit when during the bank's annual stockholders meeting in April 2024, BDO, no less than BDO President Nestor Tan announced, we will no longer fund new capacity. The entire world recognizes the need for energy transition. Earlier this month, in activities held to commemorate World Environment Day, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres took the occasion to say that May 2024 had talked about May 2024 marked the 12 straight months of hottest months ever. I do not need the words of the UN Secretary General to tell me how the past summer was like no other in terms of devastating and dangerous heat levels. And I'm sure you felt it the same way. But the passion with which he said those things and the wealth of scientific data that led him to make those jolting statements made me realize that we can no longer turn back on our path to energy transition. Secretary General Guterres cannot be less direct. It means all countries ending new coal projects now, particularly in Asia, home to 95% of planned new coal power capacity. Climate change has never been an issue that is bound by territorial restrictions. Neither are its devastating effects dependent on whether one is huge emitter or otherwise. Especially for countries such as ours, which are among the world's most vulnerable, whatever least you repose your trust in. That is why President Marcos cannot be less than spot on what he said. Natural gas will hold the key. And this is so why no less than the President himself on the 20th of April 2023 signed on behalf of the government of the Republic of the Philippines the renewal of SC-38, the Malampaya Deepwater Gas to Power Project, formerly witnessed by no less than the Secretary of Energy, Rafael Lutilla. We all are cognizant of the predicaments faced by our power industry. We have just gone through excruciating heat waves this summer that only worsened our power woes. But I believe our discussion today will indeed help shape a solid plan for natural gas, particularly LNG, to help the country hurdle these difficulties. NEA welcomes its participation in this effort. We can assure you that we are up to the challenge. I would like to end my speech with a quote from Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's first female chief executive officer. The quote, "A nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share in the responsibility for upholding the common good." In this room are some of the most important people in the energy industry, from both the private and public sector. The diversity in the room also represents a diversity of interest, each advocating for their different concerns. If there is only one thing that you remember from my speech today, let it be this. In our industry, the decisions should make directly affect the well-being and future of our people. Our industry is heavily scrutinized, as it is rightly should be, considering the effect of electricity in everyday life. I am hopeful that all of us here are willing to share in that responsibility in making the decisions which will uphold our common good. Thank you, and good day to all.
All right. Thank you very much again, Mr. Antonio Almeda, for that very insightful speech and very enlightening points on the stability and reliability of natural gas. So now we will explore how LNG adoption can accelerate economic development in critical sectors. Please join me in welcoming the President and CEO of the Development Academy of the Philippines, Dr. Maha Lea Ravago. Let's give her a round of applause, please.
I have a PowerPoint since I'm used to presenting using the PowerPoint. First of all, thank you very much to Adri and Citizen Watch, Dindo, for the invitation. Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to share my thoughts on accelerating economic development through LNG adoption in critical sector. Most of the materials that I'll be presenting today is really from my studies when I was still working as a full-time academics at the Ateneo de Manila University. But nonetheless, next please. But nonetheless, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Development Academy of the Philippines. It's a GOCC established in 1973 through the Presidential Decree 205 and subsequently amended in 1986 and in 1987. And just last year, the DAP, through the Executive Order number 45, was made an attached agency to the National Economic Development Authority to ensure consistency of its mandate with the socio-economic agenda. So, the mandate of the DAP is to build the capacity of the government workforce to implement the Philippine Development Plan, especially 2023-2028. So, this is through education and training. Next, please. So, PDP, it's chapter 12, emphasizes the role of energy security for economic growth and social development. For transparency, I'm part of the team that crafted this particular section of the PDP. So energy security is, has this dimension of affordability, accessibility, and reliability. And the Philippines aspire to transition to cleaner energy. It also aims to provide clean energy for Filipinos. So to provide context, we are here in a forum for LNG, but to provide context, two of the strategies outlined in the PDP is to enhance the delivery of energy by coordinating investment in generation, transmission, and distribution. And also, one of other strategies is to provide an enabling environment for the market to deliver an optimal fuel mix. So again, for context, whenever we talk about energy or electricity, we have to talk in a holistic manner, not just one fuel, but the totality of the system. So next, please. What is an optimal fuel mix? So in the PDP, an optimal fuel mix is a combination of fuel sources that will deliver an adequate and the least social cost of supply of energy. Least social cost meaning to say taking into account pollution and other the domestic cost of carbon. So the least social cost supply of energy toward a smooth transition to cleaner energy. And an important part is according to the Philippines' level of economic development. So natural gas can be part of that optimal fuel mix. Next. So, as we all know, perennial problem for the Philippines is the high electricity prices, second only to Singapore and somehow closer to Japan, which are both high-income countries. So meaning to say, they have a very high, households in those countries have very high income, but Filipinos are paying the same. Next. So these high income, high prices have adversely affected the economic development of the Philippines. And we have shown this in a study that we published in 2019. Next. So as a consequence, supply is limited. Per capita consumption of electricity is very low in the Philippines compared to other countries. There is also high transmission and distribution losses which signal an inefficient grid system, and not all Filipinos have access to electricity. Next. Now, we are also facing this problem, the depletion of the Malampaya gas field, which can be a boon or a bane. Okay, so with this depletion, it implies a loss of power generation worth over 3,400 megawatt. Next. So obviously, we need an energy source to replace that, because that is equivalent to about 23% of power or electricity generated for Luzon. Especially, we're aspiring for that ambition 2040. So concomitant with that is increasing or growing energy demand. So here we are seeing liquefied natural gas. It has the potential to fill the gap. But again, looking at it holistically, so do solar and wind, and new discoveries of indigenous natural gas. But since we're here in an LNG forum, let me focus on why LNG has the potential to fill the gap. But again, keep in mind that so do renewables and the discovery of indigenous gas. Okay, next. Advances in technology makes the liquefied natural gas a viable and immediate solution. These advances in technology are the liquefaction, which transform gas into liquid, making it easier to transport, and regasification, turning it back to gas so that it can be used. So with that technology, pipelines are no longer needed, like what we have. Okay, so only import terminals. Next. But that is not to say that it is cheap, okay? So the promise of LNG is moderated by the cost of investment. But the good news is the technology is also very fast. So there are strategies for efficient liquefaction like modular construction, mega trains, and floating liquefaction. Next. So where do we import? So currently, the largest exporter is the US. So its early success in the fracking technology and horizontal drilling gave the US the first mover advantage. And we expect the trade to continue on natural gas. And the largest importers from Asia includes Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, and China. But note that this year, the US Biden administration pauses new LNG approvals, meaning to say they are not approving any more LNG exporters. This is because of the belief of methane emission accompanying LNG. So this pause is likely to be until 2025. Next. So back here at the domestic front, there is a race among the private investors to construct. There is a race among these private investors on who can construct and operate the first LNG terminal. Next. And the first one, of course, to operate has the potential to capture the first mover advantage. So it's up to the private investors. Next. LNG, as I've said, has the potential to be part of this optimal fuel mix. So currently, or as of 2022, natural gas, the indigenous natural gas, takes up about 23% of power generated for Luzon. And for the whole Philippines, it's about 17%. So can you imagine if we don't find a replacement of the indigenous Malampaya? It's going to be scarcity. And when there's scarcity, prices again of electricity will increase. So it's important that we find a replacement for this LNG. It used to be around 30%, but because of the depletion, in 2022, it's now 23%. Next. So LNG can be a boon because it can facilitate, as we've heard already, smoother transition to cleaner energy. Why? Because it can replace coal and bunker oil, and it emits 50 to 60% less carbon emission than coal. But then there is the question that it also emits methane, so let's keep that in mind. It also eases intermittency issues of renewables, so it can balance. LNG can provide a quick start-up and shutdown capabilities. Next. So how do we develop our LNG industry? Adoption in critical sectors is also crucial. in the development of natural gas. Currently, in the Philippines, the current uses of natural gas are in power generation, about 98%, and in industry, about 2%, both of which can be expanded. Next. In a study that we published in 2022, it's titled Gauging the Market Potential. So our aim in this study is to gauge the market potential of LNG when it comes to the Philippines among Philippine manufacturing firms. So we focused on the locators or manufacturing firms in the special economic zones because special economic zones also make up 85% of total exports in the Philippines. Next. So why focusing on SEZs, the special economic zones? The use of natural gas would be of greater benefit to these firms because of their specialized facilities and concentration in one location. And the potential cost competitiveness, again, the word potential, cost competitiveness of natural gas could then redound to the competitiveness of the manufacturing firms or industry in the Philippines. Next. So the result of that study is that currently, based on the current knowledge of these locator firms, 65% of those firms that we surveyed were open to actually switching to natural gas. These firms are the ones that have heating production, that have heating processes in their production. Okay? And currently, they are the ones who are also kind of more knowledgeable about natural gas or the liquefied natural gas. Next. So considerations of these firms for switching to natural gas is that the compatibility of machines and equipment. Because it's not just switching to using natural gas as opposed and replacing diesel. They need to retrofit their machines. So meaning to say, there has to be that compatibility in switching. And they also consider safety and security and of course price. But note that number one is how to retrofit more than the price. Okay, next. But that is not to say that, it's very easy to do. Let us not forget that there are challenges, okay? Challenges of LNG or natural gas as a transition fuel. For LNG, there is that high capital investment and operating expenditure for LNG infrastructure. So this moderates the promise of LNG to be the transition fuel. There is also the volatility of LNG spot prices, influenced by fluctuation in global oil prices. As it is today, LNG prices are still indexed by oil, and we don't have a market in Asia, or at least the Japan and Korea market are still pegged to the US spot natural gas prices, which is the Henry Hub. Okay, and there is also that potential, again, potential inflexibility in contractual arrangement, particularly take or pay. So I hope that as we move forward, LNG industry, we do not make the same mistake as we did in the past of having these take or pay contracts. It's very important that contracts are designed appropriately. Next. We must not forget the geopolitics involved in natural gas. Before the pandemic, we were really looking at LNG as an immediate solution. Then the pandemic happens, and then the Ukraine war happens. So it has an implication, again, on the price of LNG as we import them. Next. And again, as I've mentioned earlier, there is that LNG price volatility, and the market for Asia is still linked to the US market, the Henry Hub. So there is a study, I think, by ADB, which advocate for the creation of the Asian market, not linked to US oil prices and not linked to Henry Hub. Because that would place the Philippines in an advantage if we are to develop the terminal here and become the hub for Asia for the terminal. So we see here that LNG price were stable up until 2022. And at that point, securing LNG imports become extremely difficult, especially when we see price spikes. And import projects were also delayed, some even facing risk of being canceled completely when we see that high prices. Next. So what are some initiatives and efforts? We've heard this already from the messages of Senator Gatchalian, Secretary Quilotilla, and also Yusek Garin. Next, please. So this is some shameless plugging. Initially, when we were implementing the project Energy Policy and Development Program funded by the USAID, we've already participated in technical working group and visited some of the LNG gas plants. So this was in the Energy World Corporation in Pagbilao, and that is actually me climbing the dome of the regasification building of LNG. So the EPDP spin-off to Gas Policy and Development Project, now on its third year. The first 2 years was funded by the United States Department of State, and the third year right now, it's currently being funded by ERIA and assisted by JERA, or the Japanese group. So the idea is, or the project aims to provide technical assistance to the Department of Energy to build capacity and craft policy environment conducive for business. Next, please. So what can be done? As we try to develop the LNG, or the natural gas industry, we've heard from Senator Gatchalian that they already filed a bill. There is a need to really develop and enact appropriate regulation and industrial policy. We also need to have information campaigns. The survey that we did among SNCs also is determined by the knowledge of those involved in operating their production processes. Next. There is also a role for the academe. Studies are still needed. One important question is a counterfactual question. What is the potential for LNG imports to lower energy prices relative to what will happen as domestic gas production declines? Again, bringing us back to the development agenda of the Philippines, which is to lower energy prices, thinking about it holistically. Energy conversion of manufacturing firms, and the feasibility, again, as we look towards what are the potential uses of LNG. Can it be used by the household, like in Singapore, and at the firm, conversion of their current production to using natural gas? Next. As a concluding remarks, running out of indigenous gas could either be a boon or a bane. We think of it as a transition fuel. Environmentalists view it as a boon because it would hasten transition to renewables. But it could also be a bane if a premature transition is mandated and subsidized without providing substitutes for the declining indigenous supply. The key is to facilitate the transition to renewables as we aspire to that transition without costly mandates and subsidies. So in this part, natural gas may well play a vital role. Legislation to streamline the legal and regulatory framework governing the development of the Philippine natural gas is an essential first step. Next. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ravago. So at this point, we will now proceed to our panel discussion, which will focus on fostering growth in the natural gas sector. So this panel will be moderated by Mr. Orlando Oxales, lead convener of consumer advocacy group Citizen Watch Philippines. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Thank you for being with us today. This next part of our program is usually the most liveliest and most interesting part. I'll be introducing our distinguished panel of stakeholders today. But before that, we do have one of our panelists who will be joining us online. And usually when we start this panel discussions, we ask each of our panelists to give a couple of minutes of an opening statement to get our discussions rolling. So just to facilitate things and so that we'll have a smoother flow, I'd like to ask our panelist, who is the Director of Policy and Advocacy of Asian Natural Gas and Energy Association, ANGIA, Mr. Alex Yelland, who is now joining us online. Hello, Alex. Can you hear me?
I can. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me.
Good morning. Good morning. So I'll give you the first few minutes of the panel of discussions for your opening statement. Go ahead.
Thank you. I did have a few slides just to shape those opening remarks. I'm not sure if that is on screen. Thank you very much. Well, it's a pleasure to be joining you today. My apologies, I'm not there in person, but I really appreciate the opportunity to join the panel. It's been a fascinating discussion so far. Really enjoyed hearing the speakers already today. I'll just do a quick introduction of myself and the organization that I represent, and then just sort of tee up the conversation, hopefully, for further discussion. I'm Alex Yelland. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Asia Natural Gas and Energy Association. The association was created 2-3 years back, so a relatively new organization. We're based in Singapore, but we are here to serve the region. And we were created by a number of energy companies operating in the region who felt that there was a need for a trade association to engage with governments in the region who are looking at long-term planning around the energy transition to ensure that there was energy security as well as decarbonisation policies in place for the longer term, and that they recognise the role that natural gas and LNG play in terms of delivering economic and energy security and achieve some of those decarbonisation, lower emission growth. And so if we move to the next slide, thank you. Just a word on this, just so you understand a little bit more about the organization itself. Up on the screen, you can see some of our members who've come together to form ANGEA. And it is a unique trade association and a unique sort of perspective on the industry. It was formed by a number of leading IOCs, as well as some of the largest buyers of gas and consumers of LNG in the region, such as JERA. It also has amongst our membership a number of infrastructure companies, other players along the supply chain, transportation, shipping, all parts of the value chain are really covered by ANGEA. And that's what gives it a very sort of unique perspective. We are the only regional based industry association that covers that entire energy value chain of energy producers, buyers and suppliers, and there's companies operating right across the region. And if you go to the next slide, thank you. I'll just outline a little bit about what we focus on. So we were created with a view to engaging governments and stakeholders in the region to talk about some of the energy transition opportunities and challenges that are out there and how to manage some of those things, and to bring some of the expertise from our members to governments, to actors, consultants and advisors. So currently we're looking at 5 policy and advocacy priorities. The first one is really around LNG and gas supply risk to the region. And of course, with events such as the Russia-Ukraine situation, the US LNG pause, which was referenced in the last set of remarks, supply risk has risen up the agenda. And it's something that we as an organization are heavily focused on. So we do engage not just with governments in the region to talk about supply risk, but we talk to the supply countries themselves, in particular Australia and the US. And the US, as we've just seen, plays a key role in LNG supply. They are the largest supplier of LNG over the last sort of decade. They've grown phenomenally. And in future, they hold the swing role. And so one of the areas that we are really looking at is the long-term certainty of supply out of the US, and ensuring by working with industry allies that pause does not become long-term policy. The other area that we look at is around market development and LNG capacity building. in some of the emerging newer LNG markets, such as the Philippines. And we are working with JIRA to support their GPTP capacity building work in the Philippines. That's going to be delivered later in the year. We also focus on the social license aspect that relates to the usage of natural gas and LNG. So demonstrating how LNG fits within the decarbonization pathways of countries, and showing how gas and LNG can support the development of NDCs is crucial for us as an industry, and to help stakeholders understand the role that LNG can play in decarbonisation. In addition, we also look at areas like power market modelling, and we hope to be able to do this in the Philippines at some point soon. But here we look at individual power markets and do some data modelling, and look at the future gas supply and demand picture and what that might mean for infrastructure development needs and longer term planning purposes. And then our final priority is around the development of a carbon capture and storage value chain in the region. Almost all of our members are looking at ways in which they can decarbonize and also help develop low carbon technology business lines and support hard to abate sectors to decarbonize. And in the region, CCS is probably the biggest standout opportunity that is out there for Asia Pac to decarbonize and to reach some of the Paris Agreement targets. So we're looking at how we can help build a regional value chain, looking at cross-border CCS work, and particularly around how you might harmonize some of the carbon accreditation policies and standards that would support cross-border CCS work.
Thank you.
And then thank you. My final slide, I'll just touch on very briefly. I know it's a slide that Professor Dindo brought up earlier, and I think it's just pertinent because it really does illustrate just the challenge, which I hope we'll get to on this panel. But obviously, when we're looking at some of the growth profiles for gas, and earlier it was referenced that there was a need for 3,800 megawatts by 2040. Obviously, what we need to understand is the Malampaya gas production situation, but even overall growth of demand is going to mean that even if local exploration is successful, demand is going to outstrip supply, and so the role of LNG is going to be key to ensuring that delivery of energy and power is going to be available longer term. And so I'll just conclude there and look forward to the panel remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Now we'll move along the panel discussion, and I'll be calling on one by one our distinguished panel guests. And please, as I call your name, please come over and take your seat in front of the stage. First, we have the Vice President of LNG Market Development and Origination of ExxonMobil Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Shahrukh A.R. Mirza. Following him is the Chief Operating Officer of Global Business Power Corporation. Please welcome Mr. Dominador Camu Jr. Morning. And we are so fortunate to have with us the Chief Corporate Services Officer of Aboitiz Power Corporation, Mr. Carlos Aboitiz. And please welcome the Director of Policy and Advocacy of Asian Natural Gas and Energy. We just had Alex. And now let's welcome the Managing Director and General Manager of Prime Energy Resources Development, Ms. Donabel Quizon Cruz. Okay, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I'm sure our audience is really raring to hear your valuable insights on our important topic today. So we'll start off the discussion with a couple of minutes to give each and everybody, like what Alex did, a couple of minutes to give an opening statement to kick off our discussion. May I call first on Mr. Donna, how about you? Why don't you start off? Yeah.
Okay. Honorable government officials, if you're around, my fellow panelists, esteemed guests, good morning. I am, just to say a little bit more about myself, I am the CEO of Prime Energy Resources Development. This is a fully Filipino-owned company of Mr. Enrique K. Razon's Prime Infrastructure Capital, Inc., and the operator of the country's first and only indigenous gas resource, the Malampaya Deepwater Gas-to-Power Project under Service Contract 38 mentioned by Sir Nani earlier. Thank you to StratBase for inviting me here, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this very timely conversation. Much has already been said about the need to import LNG for power supply stability due to diminishing Malampaya gas production. I stand behind this strategy. Development of indigenous gas resources from discovery to production takes time, 7 to 10 years. LNG must come in to fill the gap. There is, however, one question I'd like to ask very openly and for transparent discussion. Do we allow LNG, intentionally or unintentionally, to completely replace indigenous gas? My answer would be, we cannot and we must not. We need both because there is more than enough demand for gas. The phrase collective approach that you've often seen today here is incredibly apt because it is the synergy of imported LNG and indigenous gas that creates power supply reliability, sustainability, and affordability. And for LNG to take root as a trusted fuel source, it needs indigenous gas as its stable ground. Indigenous gas development must remain a bedrock of our energy policy. Allow me to offer 3 reasons why I believe this is so. Number 1, indigenous gas guarantees fuel supply as our power grid becomes increasingly vulnerable to weather and other disruptions. In high winds and waves, LNG floating storage and regasification units or floating storage units must disconnect from berth and cut fuel supply to power plants in order to remain safe. In extreme heat, hydro and coal plants suffer from lower water levels and high sea cooling water temperatures, respectively. Malampaya production facilities, in contrast, are designed for fickle weather. During the April heat wave, when the Luzon grid was on yellow and red alert, Malampaya operated at close to 120% of its current system capacity, fueling greater than 2,000 megawatts or about 20% of Luzon's total power demand. This helped power plants or LNG importers manage their rapidly depleting stocks of LNG while awaiting deliveries from the spot market. Imagine what would have happened if this weather situation was a global situation and we couldn't even import LNG. Every time Malampaya was used instead of LNG and diesel during that time, each resident of Luzon saved 50 centavos to 20 pesos per kilowatt hour off of their electricity bill. This brings me to the second reason why indigenous gas remains so fundamentally critical. Second reason. Indigenous gas stabilizes our electricity prices as we become increasingly dependent on imported LNG for power generation. The chart you see on screen tells the story. Malampaya gas prices are the ones that you see on the blue line there. During the Ukraine war, spot and even term LNG prices skyrocketed while Malampaya gas prices remained low. Had there not been Malampaya gas during that time, Filipinos would have paid on average 25 pesos per kilowatt hour of fuel costs for using LNG, compared to only 6 pesos per kilowatt hour for using Malampaya. By using LNG, we become more vulnerable to market shocks, really. Indigenous gas prices remain largely stable against these shocks and therefore cushions our electricity bills from its adverse effects. Third reason, indigenous gas magnetizes the environment that supports expansion of the natural gas industry. Take this. For every peso of net revenue or net sales for Malampaya gas, 60 centavos is remitted to the government. This amounts to 300 to 500 million US dollars annually for use in energy development projects. Malampaya is the lifeblood of world-class, highly skilled workers and businesses whose capability has matured enough over the years to service a more complex natural gas industry. The presence of a competent and profitable domestic gas business here enhances the country's attractiveness to investors because it signals a stable fiscal and regulatory regime, which I believe we do have, and acts as an anchor for potential expansions into the local energy market. I have been approached many times by potential investors for exactly these reasons. For example, there is a push for the concept of gas aggregation or blending domestic and imported gas because it creates more value for everyone, really. It maximizes indigenous gas use, lowers fuel costs through economies of scale, manages LNG scheduling risks, and guarantees fuel supply to more and more power plants. I can go on, and apologies, articulating many reasons to love indigenous gas. It is a force for good. If we continue to foster its growth, it will foster the growth of the broader natural gas industry. This is why the SC38 Consortium is committed to investing about $800 million, or a bit more actually, to extend the life of Malampaya and produce gas from 2 new wells in 2026. We are drilling next year, in fact. The country has petroleum resources really waiting to be extracted, but we won't have much time if we don't act now. So what practical steps can we take? 1, industry players to operationalize the DOE's thrust to prioritize the procurement and utilization of indigenous gas. 2, enact regulations to incentivize and accelerate exploration and development of our indigenous gas resources, especially from mature fields. 3, all of us here, really, to unite and be one team for the common good, as Hernani has said earlier. With the DOE's leadership, implement common goals and operating principles to aggregate the sources of gas or fuel for energy security and least cost. I'd like to end by saying that with the advent of LNG in the country, in the Philippines, we are becoming part of a global energy ecosystem. The strongest economies are the ones where its players take advantage of its homegrown resources to scale up and level up. We've proven time and again that we absolutely can. Our very own Malampaya project continues to be a shining example of the Filipinos' ingenuity and our bayanihan spirit. Let's harness this spirit para sa bayan. That's all.
Thank you so much, Dana. Really loud and clear on the point of the importance of indigenous. Thank you. And now let's hear from Carlos.
Sure, as the slides come up. So good morning, everyone. And thank you to everybody here for coming, and thank you to Dindo for organizing this. It's really important that we have as many nuanced conversations about energy as possible because it's a very complex topic, and so today is a great opportunity for that. So thank you very much. So a quick introduction. So I'm Carlos Aboitiz from Aboitiz Power. Aboitiz Power is a leading energy company in the Philippines. We've been around for more than 100 years. We are a fairly balanced energy company. So the perspective I hope to bring to the conversation today is one of balance, from power generation to power distribution to speaking on behalf of the consumers, since we buy power on behalf of them from in our distribution utilities and in our retail electricity supplier businesses. So we in the energy sector provide value to society by providing energy when it's needed at a reasonable cost and with the least adverse environmental impact. This is expressed by the energy trilemma, a set of 3 objectives that participants in the energy system must care to balance. As implied with the world trilemma, sometimes achieving one objective means compromising on another, making this a supremely difficult job. Today, we in the Philippines are experiencing challenges across the 3 dimensions, and allow me to briefly dig into these. First, on energy security, we're experiencing energy insecurity, as evidenced by the many red and yellow alerts that we see. This is a result of demand growing faster than expected, constrained supply growth, and inadequate transmission and distribution infrastructure. Second, energy affordability. We often hear how expensive our electricity and gasoline prices are. Although the comparison you see above, on the next slide at least, is not apples to apples. Sorry, I think the slides will, there we go. It's not apples to apples due to the relative lack of subsidies in the Philippines. it is the reality that our industrial companies, our commercial businesses, and our households have to manage anyway. Lastly, energy sustainability. Our emissions continue to rise, as is true of most growing nations. However, we must place this in the right context. We produce less than a quarter of the global average emissions per capita. We produce less than 1% of total global emissions. We are not proportionally responsible for climate change. When you combine this with the fact that we are not as capable as other countries, with a GDP per capita of, again, 4 times less than the global average, and as Dindo showed earlier, we are the most vulnerable country to climate change, which effectively means that we have to pick up a disproportionately high bill at the end of the year just to adapt our communities to the problem. So given our context of energy insecurity, higher than average power prices, and lower than average emissions per capita, we believe that our priority should be to secure our energy system at the lowest possible cost to the consumer. Energy security ultimately is about securing the human transition of Filipinos out of poverty and into modern society with all of its social benefits. Gas plays an important role in energy security. Namely, it is flexible, able to easily ramp up and down as needed, and therefore it is a more cost-efficient alternative for mid-merit energy needs and for some ancillary services. It's also dispatchable, unlike renewable energy, which means it is there when we need it. Lastly, it's important because it helps us to diversify our upstream fuel supply from coal, allowing for some balance to manage discrete risks to coal supply. However, gas is not the only solution to all our energy needs. We need to work with coal and other new technologies for more affordable baseload power. It also needs to work with renewable energy, dispatchable and variable, battery energy storage systems, and other technologies for peaking power and ancillary services to the grid. At Aboitiz Power, we advocate for an all options on the table approach that focuses on energy security at affordable prices above all else. We advocate for a transparent, market-led approach to developing our gas-fired power sector that puts our consumers first. AP is investing in the LNG future of the Philippines while we continue investing in renewable energy and other forms of electricity to try to strike a balance between security, affordability, and sustainability. The Philippines has a bright economic future ahead of it that will improve the lives of many Filipinos, and we must secure it. We also acknowledge that although we are not a key contributor to climate change, we too must contribute to a just energy transition. To meet these dual transitions, both human and climate, Aboitiz Power has set ambitious goals to grow its generation fleet towards 10 gigawatts with a 50-50 capacity mix between renewable and thermal energy by 2030. But achieving this transformation requires more than just our own efforts, of course. It requires that we as a sector and as a nation collaborate to transform our energy for a better world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Really love your approach to consumer first. Love it. Now, let's listen to the Chief Operating Officer of Global Business Power Corporation, Dong.
Thank you. Again, good day to everyone and our distinguished speakers and my co-panelists here, along with our guests and friends in the private and power sectors, as well as all other guests who are with us here in this forum. Thank you to StratBase, along with Citizen Watch, for organizing this conference, bringing everyone from various sectors together to address an important discourse on advancing energy security and fueling sustainable progress with LNG. Now, as we stand at the threshold of growth and prosperity for the Philippines, we've heard a lot of the speakers, especially from DOE, Undersecretary Garin, as we must address the challenges that come with a growing population and increased economic, and with it, the demand for stable, reliable, and affordable electricity becomes front and center. On the cups of the need for electricity is not just about powering our homes and businesses. It is about empowering our people in the east to reliable and affordable electricity as a fundamental driver to economic development. Against the backdrop of the country's power generation capacity unable to keep pace with the rising electricity demand, as mentioned by my co-panelists here, Arlos, about red alert and yellow alert that we have been having, we must explore commercially and readily available power generation technologies that can simultaneously address the variability and penetration of renewable and storage energy in the power sector. Renewable green is good, but we are of the view that, just like, any technology, especially in the Philippines, it will take time and will require a deliberate transitions, to achieve it. Now, one readily and commercially available solution to this conundrum is the advancement of LNG to power. LNG offers several advantages that make it an ideal choice for enhancing our power generation capacity. Aside from being considered as a cleaner and more environmentally friendly alternative to the traditional fossil fuels, LNG is equally abundant and traded in the international market, can be stored and transported just like any other international commodities. As we develop the LNG infrastructures in our country, at first as an onshore floating LNG terminals, then perhaps at a later time, a hub and spoke to cater to the other islands and even to the region, we can diversify our power generation energy mix using LNG as an alternative to coal and oil. Guided by the government's energy plan, which spelled out a comprehensive roadmap to achieve its goal of increasing the share of RE to 50% of the total generation mix by 2040, LNG as a transition fuel fits perfectly. Coupled with LNG to power using gas turbine or even gas diesel engines for smaller islands, its ability to respond and smoothen the frequent and rapid load swings brought by the intermittent or variable VRE sources is second to none. We at Meralco PowerGen have responded to the challenges head-on. Our two-pronged strategy for power generation growth is, first, expand our RE portfolio using renewable energy sources such as solar and wind. Then second, build new high-efficiency, low-emissions baseload power plants with clear-cut focus in developing and investing in cleaner fuel alternatives such as natural gas and other innovative thermal technologies. It also underscores our commitment to our parent, Meralco Sustainable Agenda, which is powering the good life. Rooted in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, it is marked by a distinctive focus on 4 strategic pillars, which we call as 4 Ps: power, planet, people, and prosperity. The development of additional power plants, particularly LNG to power, is a strategic imperative for the Philippines. It is a crucial step towards meeting our fragile electricity supply, mounting power demand, and influx of VREs to ensure a resilient, reliable, and sustainable energy supply in the next decade. Let us work together with vision and determination to power the good life and fuel our nation toward prosperity. I would want to end it by just giving you a brief background of my, I've been with the industry, especially on the power generation, for about 35 years. Know the A to say of the, been fortunate to work with National Electrification here. Our administrator, Manny Almeida, is here. Started there and climbed all the way up to the power generation industry. Worked with General Electric overseas in Taiwan, so I've been very exposed to natural gas. and also in Thailand, and recently, obviously, been here in the Philippines for about maybe 14 years now, working with, I haven't worked with Colliers yet, but I worked with First Gen, and now working for MGen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bon. I'm sure your deep experience will be very valuable in this discussion. Thank you so much. And now let's hear from the Vice President of LNG Market Development and Origination of ExxonMobil Corporation, Mr. Shahrukh.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, thank you very much for having me. Great thanks to Dindo and Stratbase for hosting us here today. It's a great day. I would like to draw a reference from our ExxonMobil Global LNG Outlook. Between now and the year 2050, the world is expected to add around 2 billion more people to reach almost 10 billion in total. Along with it, the global economy will double in size. To support this growing population, with rising living standards, we project the world will need to produce 15% more energy in 2050 than it does today. While striving to reduce CO2 emissions, the challenge, of course, is that increasing energy supply with lower emissions requires more infrastructure and more cost, whilst we must strive to solve the energy trilemma of energy security at the lowest cost and lowest emissions, and that is where LNG plays a critical role. As growing economies around the world seek to diversify their energy supplies, achieve their climate goals, and integrate intermittent renewables in their energy mix, the demand for cleaner burning natural gas grows. We see it becoming the fuel of choice, displacing other more carbon-intensive fuels like coal. We see LNG demand continuing to grow at 4 to 5% a year as the world's population demands a flexible, reliable, and efficient fuel choice. Generating power with natural gas is advantaged versus coal, as natural gas emits up to 60% lower greenhouse gas emissions and produces significantly fewer pollutants than coal for power generation. LNG to power provides the perfect complement to renewable generation, firming up the grid and readily dispatchable power when needed. This combination is ideal because while wind and solar provide emission benefits, they are, of course, intermittent. Natural gas improves the flexibility of renewable assets and expands their potential usage by serving as a reliable base load fuel, ramping up when the wind slows or the sun is not shining. The Philippines has built new LNG import infrastructure, which will go a long way towards energy security, reliability, and stability. Securing long-term LNG supply as a reliable and flexible energy source will enable the country to deliver growth, strong, whilst meeting its GHG reduction plan. Brazil is a great example of a country that has embraced the combination of renewables and LNG. The country has developed more than 30 million tons of import capacity. When hydro stocks go low, like they were in 2021, they import LNG. When there is sufficient hydro, as there was in 2023, they import less. The combination provides the balance of energy security at the lowest cost and lowest emissions. Creating optionality in our energy mix is a sound strategy for ensuring energy availability while pivoting to a lower carbon future. In Asia, we see long-term LNG agreements helping Asian countries meet their growing energy needs while supporting their climate goals. Many of them significantly increase the use of gas and LNG in their energy mix and have rapidly increased the number of long-term LNG contracts to underpin their economic growth. For Asian countries to continue to build on their resilience and meet projected demand, while lowering emissions, the use of LNG via long-term agreements will be fundamental. ExxonMobil is interested in supporting the Philippines with reliable energy supply. We have more than 140 years of history in the global energy industry and are a leader in LNG with more than 40 years experience in building long-term energy resilience for our customers by producing affordable, lower carbon intensity energy such as LNG. We are very confident in the long-term growth of LNG and the role it will play in the energy transition, focusing on energy security at the lowest cost with the lowest emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, just a few words on what I do and what the team does. So I lead ExxonMobil's Global LNG Market Development Group, and our team is tasked with the mission to enable LNG and LNG infrastructure, displacing coal and liquids to countries which are wanting to transition along the energy pathway. So we're here today and tomorrow and happy to take on any questions and looking forward to this auspicious panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shahrukh. So let's now take off from, thank you, let's give him let's take off from what you just said. That was very interesting what you said about other countries who did their transition, and now that we are in that direction, transitioning. We'd like you and our panelists here to share your observations of what the other economies are doing in terms of best practices in how they actually successfully transition, and how we should actually apply these lessons, applicable lessons that we could apply here as we're venturing towards integrating LNG in our power mix. Let's start with you, sir.
Well, I think a great example is what Brazil has done, right? I mean, they have a lot of, they rely on hydropower. They rely on hydropower, and when there's less rain, they import more LNG. But the way they've been able to manage the infrastructure is by enabling bankable commercial agreements where they've built the LNG value chain, i.e. the LNG receiving facilities, the power plants, in a way where the fixed infrastructure can be paid off in a fixed stipulated time frame through sovereign-backed agreements, through certain energy cost pass-throughs into the PPA. So the entire LNG value chain in other countries, not only in Brazil, this is a significant amount of capital outlay, which requires obviously a debt and equity component. So you have to have the right commercial structures which will enable this. So I think, I mean, as long as we can frame the right commercial structures to make it bankable, Philippines should be able to build out the infrastructure through the private sector, developing it, and then securing long-term LNG is the way to go with energy stability and reliability and security. So that's one aspect which you should really look at enabling that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Long-term LNG. Yes, I'd like to call on our online panelists. Alex, would you share your insights on what you see our other economies have applied in transitioning, and how those lessons can be applied here?
Yes, thank you. Just to follow on from that last comment in particular around the long-term approach, taking a long-term look at how you would manage LNG imports and the requirement for long-term contracts. Some countries who have taken a shorter-term approach and purely have looked to buy on the spot market are obviously challenged, when spot markets change. And one of the things which we obviously see with the LNG industry that it is affected by geopolitical events. And you think right back to the evolution of the industry back in the 70s, with the oil crisis, and that really sort of lent itself to the development of LNG and the push for LNG. And then recently, with things like the Russia-Ukraine situation, countries that had become comfortable in the spot market were suddenly finding themselves in a very difficult spot. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Thailand in Asia, for example. And so this can be a challenge for countries who are beginning to look at establishing themselves as an LNG importer, is how do you take that long-term approach? And that is required for the development of a value chain here, and also for longer-term security of supply. So that's one of the key things that we would look for. So having that long-term policy setting is important. Establishing a more integrated approach to government approvals for that entire value chain is necessary. And then we're seeing markets that have looked at how they use gas outside of power generation. And it's encouraging to hear earlier that, as well as looking at power generation, the Philippines is looking beyond that for gas usage into other applications, because that is also critical for long-term development.
Thank you, Alex. Dom, would you have any insights on your side?
Perhaps my views is more on the thing just picking up from some of the speakers that we have, that to develop the LNG, although the anchor will always be the power plant, but one is it was mentioned by from the president of DAP about downstream, like special economic zones. But the other thing to recognize is LNG as as an alternative of transition fuel for the Philippines is not just about Luzon. It should also actually encompass some of the equally main and islands that we have. Obviously, one could be Cebu, Iloilo, which we have a power plant there, and even as far back as Mindanao. So understanding the infrastructure is key. I don't think building long pipelines, just like submarine cable, is a feasible approach. So I think building the hub is really key here. And then what you do is, we call it a hub and a spoke, because what you can do now is, since the size of some of those plants, because LNG terminals are capital intensive, is they would just have to downsize them and be able to deliver the requirement, since the megawatt or the capacity is not as big as like what's being developed right now along the Batangas coastline. And that's really feasible. I mean, there's ship-to-ship transfer. I mean, my colleagues can add to this. There are ability to use, I call it an old lady, for example. Those are, I mean, certain ships can no longer actually go on international at some point, maybe 40 years. But they can actually ply and be used domestically because they're not in open seas like Pacific and Atlantic. And part of the long-term plan should really take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dom. How about you, Carlos?
Sure. I'd share just two thoughts. The first is that, we got to design our approach to LNG with the context in mind, right? So Philippine context is different than the context of other countries. In particular, again, from a climate perspective, we are in a different place, and therefore we should be designing our transition based on what is just and balancing the human transition. And at the same time, we have different natural resource endowments. We have a different geography. And so how we design our plan needs to be specific to our context. And then the second thought I'd share is that we're new to the LNG industry. We've been in electricity for a very long time, but LNG and gas is, LNG is new to the Philippines, and therefore we're new to it. But what we're seeing already is the importance of strategic partnerships. We're seeing, like, from a gas to power perspective, we're seeing, as was mentioned earlier, the whole world is turning to gas, which means that a lot of the OEMs and their factories are very busy. And so having critical relationships to be able to secure even your turbines and your trains, to be able to build a gas plant, to be able to as an offtake to your LNG facility. is going to require strategic partnerships. And that's true also for the gas supply and for all the infrastructure in between. So I think strategic partnership is going to be critical. So how the government supports that, how we as a private sector collaborate with each other to develop those partnerships, I think is going to be very important.
Totally agree with that need for all of these partnerships and integrating all of these approaches. Thank you, Carlos. And how about Donna?
I'd like to build on what Mr. Camo said earlier about the importance of having available infrastructure already to kind of grow that integrated sort of value chain, because in fact we do have. But let me first narrate what we also learned about practices in other countries that actually work. So in Thailand, for example, they have really, what do they, so I'll talk about the gas side of things. In Thailand, they have there a so-called gas pooling mechanism. So they have a gas aggregation model, PTT leads it, where what they do to ensure that there is least cost actually in energy security or security of the gas supply is that they pool the gas supply, both domestic, pipe, and LNG, and then make sure that that sort of pool then is kind of farmed out to the various requirements, both power and industry, at the least cost. So the lesson for us there is that it is quite important actually to have some form of oversight or centralization of the gas supply for the consumers, really. Because if we just kind of rely on kind of a free market sort of economics, yes, there would be some normalization afterwards of the price, but the least cost story is never straightforward. So some form of optimization of the pool in such a way that power prices eventually become affordable requires that form of oversight, so sort of central aggregation. Now, the second point is that PTT is able to do this really well is because they also operate the whole infrastructure, the gas pipelines, the offshore platforms, the LNG terminals, the power plants. We don't have that here. Mr. Carlos is right, this is a very different context that we have here, but it doesn't mean we have to build new ones because we already have. We already have the Malampaya infrastructure. There is a gas export pipeline there. And even if it's indigenous gas, it is connected actually to 2 LNG terminals that we already have in the Batangas area. So that whole pipeline network can be the starting point. It is in fact now the nerve center of gas-fired power. So if we build off of that, with some form of oversight, aggregation, through collaboration, through partnerships, strategic partnerships, we can make it work, similar to PTT and maybe even better, in fact.
Thank you, Donna. That's very interesting. We've been talking about LNG as really a transition or a bridge fuel in our journey towards renewable energy. And we've been hearing a lot of discussions about the challenges and are we ready and all of that. You know, what's the cost going to be? I'd like to ask your insights from your point of view, taking into context how the Philippines is right now in terms of what we are, in terms of our dependence on coal and our current energy mix. What are the critical factors that we need to work together with government to make LNG work? We've heard the discussions about how it's very critical and how it can really work, especially in addressing how this transition to renewable energy as we're waiting for this technology to be at such a stage to be at the base load. And base load right now, the cost of base load for all consumers, the stability of base load and cost of consumers is #1 concern. So what do you feel are the most critical factors that we need government, the private sector, all of us need to work on and focus on? How about, let's start with Donna again.
Is this in fact a continuation of what I said earlier?
Yes, yes.
So, and also what my colleague, Mr. Sharouk, also said earlier. So, I think at the moment, it is difficult we are able to import LNG, but it is from the spot market, where the cost of the LNG would be subject to the market. And the last number that we saw, if you add the regasification costs and the terminal, all other terminal-related cost to LNG, the price was about $14 to $15 per MBTU compared to just about $12 per MBTU for indigenous gas. So there is a premium to be paid, unfortunately, simply because we're importing from the spot market. So for that to change, there needs to be some form of agreement, an offtake agreement, some kind of committed volumes that this volume of LNG will be used by the buyers of LNG. And that's the only way that we can then get a term contract, a long-term contract, whose pricing would be a bit different, similar to indigenous gas and definitely cheaper than the spot. Now, is that doable at the moment? I cannot answer because the power contracting sort of terms of reference that we have now is a little bit different. We don't have anymore what we call a minimum energy offtake, right? So one solution that we did discuss a little bit and talk about is, could we then, again, aggregate? Because if there is a central aggregation of the fuel supply, be it indigenous gas, spot, or LNG, an aggregator or a group of aggregators, maybe a consortium, a strategic partnership, would be able to play around with that mix, with that portfolio, in such a way that it would be able to take the risk in a way or guarantee that there will be supply if, for example, this power plant cannot take this delivery of LNG for whatever reason. Then this aggregation strategy or model would then be able to sort of divert that sort of a cargo or volume elsewhere in that kind of aggregated network. And by doing so, reduce the exposure. So it's kind of like that. It's really a portfolio optimization piece that helps to really ease in the use of LNG in the country.
Do you already have that policy environment for that aggregation strategy?
At the moment, there's none, although it's kind of contemplated in the Downstream natural gas law that the Senate is now kind of finalizing. Now, that law is very high level, of course. I advocated earlier in my opening statement for some form of operating principles or guidelines or common goals for the group of industry players to be able to actually do that in such a way that the intent, really, the underlying intent, the most important safeguard is that the cost of fuel for consumers is safeguarded.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Carlos, your thoughts?
Yeah, so, excuse me, a lot of ideas have already been shared, but I would maybe just add a couple. One would be, so to support upstream gas to power builds and LNG builds, you need downstream contracts for electricity. Most of the gas is going to be converted to power. So I think aggregating demand the government can help do that, and they already are doing that for renewable energy. And I know that there are thoughts to do it for more dispatchable power as well. So I think that will just help. And I think our the head of NEA, who's Manny here, who was talking about his efforts to try to do that with the different cooperatives, bringing demand together in support of these upstream projects. So I think that will help. I think on the marketing, I think the long-term contracting of gas, I think that will come. It's early days for our industry. We've just started, and so your initial shipments will be spot shipments as part of that beginning phase. But I think over time the contracting will happen, and you will get more hopefully strategic partnerships and more predictability around the supply of gas and the pricing of gas. So I'd just say the downstream contracting could help further spur more investment upstream.
Yeah. Alex, I'll call on you next. What are your thoughts on the critical factors that we need to address?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything that I've heard so far on the panel. So I'll just try and touch on a couple of additional points that I think also worth keeping in mind. Just from in terms of how you sort of set the scene for enticing investment in capital-intensive LNG import infrastructure. Having those long-term contracts in place, having that competitive selection process for project financing is important. But just on the kind of supply side of it all as well, bringing down the long-term cost of LNG or moderating costs is really about that global supply and where there are potential supply risks. Ways in which countries like the Philippines can work together to ensure that their interests are heard. There are a lot of back and forth around the role of gas in the energy transition. We've talked about the US pause And what we're hearing when we speak to people in DC is that they hear a lot from Europe about their needs, but they don't hear a lot from Asia. So there are the ways in which Philippines can advocate for the way that they see gas playing into their future energy demands that can be helpful. There's probably a degree of also sort of just sort of education that would require as you're entering an LNG market and you're looking at long-term contracts to ensure that people understand why you're doing this versus taking them onto the spot market, because there are obviously sensitivities that come with that. I think another thing to think about, which we haven't really touched on, is shipping. And this is a particularly vulnerability on the supply side. So if you look at, for example, Taiwan, that's a particular sensitivity for them, where third-party shipping may not go into areas where there is geopolitical concerns, right? And so having your own ability to call on third-party shipping or having your own shipping is really important for LNG supply and managing that potential risk. So I'll stop there because I know we're running out of time, and I'll let others speak.
Yeah. Dom, your perspective?
Yeah, again, good
Critical
morning.
factors?
I think I want to start and make it a bit more layman's. Before, the way the power is always one flow going to the consumer. So meaning, if there's a sudden reduction or increase in load, generators or the one that generates power, they only have one mindset, that is to increase their capacity. Now with the variable renewable energy, it's actually now a challenge because there are times, especially during peak hours, where there's a sudden increase in load, but at the same time, the variable renewable energy now on the generator side, there's a sudden reduction of output. So my thoughts being, it's kind of like a catch-22. And we're talking about affordable, resilient, robust. But on the part of us, the GenCos, if I can speak for us, is we're now actually being asked to address not just the conventional the conventional theory about managing the load. We're also being asked to also manage the capacity that the conventional wisdom is always to increase output. It's not that anymore. So you have to supply actually two sources at any given time. It's very important because, and my view is the government along with the private sectors recognize this. And in fact, there has been what we call this co-optimized market that has recently been pushed by the DOE. It's still in the works, if I may. But what it does is we now are able not just to address kilowatt hours. The kilowatt hours is what you consume. We're also now being addressed to address megawatt. So there's now two different markets that's being created to kind of help us bridge this challenge of having to supply the load at the same time, if there's a reduction in capacity, being able to pick it up and serve that reduction in capacity at the same time. So the co-optimized market is being recognized extensively. We think that similar to when the WESM was developed, I think it took about 10 years. Hopefully it will be shorter than that, because for us, this very, I call it decent but ambitious goal of 50% of the RE coming in, and it's probably in a span of 10 years, will have to go hand in hand with this, I call it that co-optimized market, where you will be able, given the chance, to obviously bid in terms of megawatt as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Sharuk, do you have any?
Yeah, I think I would just like to echo the words spoken by Carlos and Donna, my esteemed colleague over here, and Alex. But I think countries looking to go down the energy transition pathway, I think demand aggregation is very important. Power demand aggregation, then gas demand aggregation. And then the third thing is, if you look at other regions and countries and continents, how they are managing intermittency of renewables by building out gas storages or LNG storages to manage the intermittency is also very critical. And then countries which are not that advanced in the renewables pathway and in the intermittency of renewables then have to build out new gas-fired generation. But to bank those contracts, as Carlos, you said, to lock in the OEM providers for the gas turbines, to lock in the shipping of the regasification facilities, to lock in long-term contracts, you need what we call as minimum take or pay obligations on power plant purchase agreements or power purchase agreements with a minimum plant load factor. So these are the attributes which countries have to look at to enable this whole ecosystem to kick off. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm being signaled to, yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, unfortunately, times fly so fast. Well, probably for a final round, I'd like to ask each and every one of our panelists to give a couple of minutes of a final message that you want to reach, to send to our audience right now. We have a full house right now here in AIM, and there are, I'm sure, multitudes there watching live online, and they're very much waiting for your important message, especially for our other stakeholders and partners in the power and energy sector and in government. So let me start with Donna.
I've been hearing the speeches this morning and then the discussion today, and what struck me really is that we're coming at this topic from different angles. There's an angle of least cost, so I know our generation, our distribution utility company, distribution utilities would really want to ensure the least cost of electricity. We've got our climate change advocates who would really want to increase the use of gas. We've got indigenous gas people who would like, of course, to find the new Malampaya hub. We've also got our LNG sort of group who would like to increase the utilization also of LNG. So I think I don't see any contest here or competition, in fact. We are all actually going for the same goal. And I think the one thing that we all probably need to learn to start to build within ourselves is to just trust each other, that no one party has an ulterior sort of, or a hidden agenda or motive to kind of profit from this or take over the market or whatever. It's really about what makes sense for the country and for the climate. And if we start from that perspective and really work together very openly and transparently, I think we can really crack this. So it's really wonderful that we did this. Well done to Stratbase, really. I hope this is not the last conversation. We keep talking about this, and not just on high-level motherhood statements, but really start talking about operating principles, mechanics, and the like. Roll our sleeves up and have working sessions like this, and I hope that would get us somewhere.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess as a parting message, I would just go back to my first slide, which is the slide that says that our job here is to produce secure, affordable, and sustainable energy, right? And again, there are trade-offs sometimes between those objectives. And so we as private sector participants, as government representatives, we have a very tough job ahead of us. And I think that, and I think what's critical is the collaboration between private and public sectors, collaboration within the private sectors. Again, strategic partnerships are going to be important for this moving forward. But it's also really important to understand that not one, and although we're focused on LNG today, not one technology is going to solve all these problems, is going to achieve all those objectives. So we have to look at it within the context of a larger energy mix and a larger and specific country context. And so everything we do must be with the consumer in mind, the Filipino in mind, fundamentally. And with that, I think we'll be successful in both advancing the human transition that we're all a part of here and the energy transition, environmental transition. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlos. Alex, any parting words?
Yeah, thank you. It's been great to join the panel. Just a couple of concluding comments. We've talked a lot about some of the challenges with developing LNG import market. Look, and when you go back in history and look at where LNG started, people thought it wouldn't happen. When Japan first started to do it, they said it was too difficult. but they did it because they had very clear policy direction. Then there was strong alignment and collaboration between government, policy, and industry. So I think for the Philippines, having that clarity and certainty around permits, regulations, and promotion of gas as the preferred source here in the transition is key. Encouraging that use of gas beyond the power sector is going to be helpful as well. And having a very sort of clear voice and collaboration opportunity between industry and government will help as well. And so keep building that institutional capacity of LNG markets and infrastructure and policy. And don't forget to engage, with regional and international partners to secure that long-term supply. Make sure that multilateral banks and financing institutions are there to support you as well. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the panel.
Thank you, Alex. And we'll have some words from Dom.
Again, good morning and thank you. I think from parting words, I just want to probably keep it simple and from a technology standpoint. Been fortunate to travel across the globe as well, and knowing that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Been to Japan, been to Canada, a lot of those countries, which probably is quite ahead of us in what we're trying to accomplish here in the Philippines, and that's really trying to find the transition technology, and ultimately, hopefully, at some point, you have completely 100% renewable that can address, across the spectrum of the load that we need. But at the moment, the technology we're really looking for is to bridge that point where everybody wants to be 100% renewable. And the technology I see are actually just coming from two technologies, and one is the LNG, primarily because it's able to address variability and obviously intermittency of VREs. And the other technology, if we want to go down road, it's quite, in my view, not as matured, even from a regulatory standpoint, is what we call the small modular reactors, or SMRs. Those are the only two technologies that I know out there. And from my perspective, from a social acceptance, obviously, LNG, or natural gas is far more acceptable compared to, I know that, I've seen how safe an SMR can be, but from a social acceptance, I think we're far away from getting that, given that ultimately, really the stakeholders are our constituents in the LGUs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dom. Modular reactors, that's a whole different session. And of course, Sharuk.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I'd like to echo all the points this esteemed panel has said. I think to sum it up, it's all about the government enabling the right regulatory enablers, the private sector coming in, building the partnerships, and then the global supply chain, whether you call it the OEMs or the IOCs, enabling all that structure. So it can only happen through the right regulation and partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give our panel a big round of applause. Let's ask our panelists to please stand up, and I think it's time for photo. Yeah, and our speakers to please join us on stage. Dom. Alex would be somewhere there, yeah. Just leave him some space for the photographer. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
RP1 hit our CEO. Hey, thank you so much, and I turn you back over to Joyce.
All right, thank you very much. Let's give another round of applause to our panelists for a very comprehensive and insightful discussion. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Sharuk Mirza, Mr. Dominador Camo Jr., Mr. Carlos Aboites, Ms. Donabel Cuizon Cruz, and Mr. Alex Yellen. And of course, our moderator, Mr. Orlando Oxales. All right. And to formally conclude our program, I would like to invite back on stage Attorney Jose Christopher Kit Belmonte, convener of Citizen Watch Philippines, to deliver the closing remarks. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Good morning, friends. I'm just supposed to deliver the closing remarks and say thank you. But before this, I would like first to extend my deepest gratitude to all those who have made this event a success. First of all, to our distinguished speakers and panelists, of course, Professor Dindo Manhit, Brad, it's always been a privilege working with you and your strategic insights of putting together stakeholders in industries and projects that will make things better for the Filipino people are a wonder to see. So let's give a big hand to Professor Dindo Manhit. Our government resource persons, I would have liked to see my colleagues, but as usual, mabigat ang mga oras nila, but let's give a big hand to Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, Secretary Popo Lotilla, Yusek Sharon Garin, and yes, palakpakan po natin sila. Of course, nagpaalam po si NEA Administrator Antonio Almeda. Palakpakan din po natin siya. Ma'am, very sharp po talaga si Professor Maha Lea Ravago ng DAP. Palakpakan po natin siya. Thank you very much, ma'am. Our esteemed panelists, I've had several occasions to work with the forum set up by StratBase, and laging bitin. Laging you get 2 or 3 rounds and then hindi ho natatapos. But it's always a start. And as you indeed mentioned, what's important is to build the connections and build the trust. And hopefully you work together for the Filipino people, the Filipino consumers. So let's give them a big hand. Di ko na po kayo isa-isahin. Thank you very much for the cards. I should remember to bring cards of my own also next time. Orly, our moderator, Orly Oxales, the lead convener. Actually, siya ho yung talagang nagtatrabaho ho dito. Ako lang ho ang tagasara niya para sa kanya. So palakpakan po natin si Orly Oxales. Thank you for joining us today for this crucial discussion on the future of energy security in the Philippines. As we come to the end of this forum, I would like to share some reflections on the insights we've gained and the path forward. The Philippines is at a pivotal moment in its energy journey. We are moving away from cheaper but environmentally detrimental coal, and while renewable energy holds promise, it is often expensive and intermittent. This situation presents us with both a challenge and an opportunity to innovate and adopt. Liquefied natural gas is being positioned as a reliable bridge fuel in our transition from coal to zero carbon alternatives. However, it is clear from our discussions today and recent analysis that LNG in its current state is not the cheaper option. Supply constraints and high global prices exacerbated by geopolitical events have driven LNG prices to record highs. While LNG offers a cleaner and more flexible energy source compared to coal, the current market conditions highlight the need for robust cost-saving mechanisms to mitigate price volatility. It is imperative that we develop strategies to protect Filipino consumers from the potential financial burden. This includes advocating for a rationalized tax regime on imported LNG and all fuels for power generation. By doing so, we can substantially reduce costs and make this transitional phase more manageable for our economy. The declining reserves of the Malampaya gas field, however, nakakatuwa po yung sinabi niyong baka ma-extend po or makakuha ng other local alternatives. However, underscores the urgency to establish a reliable LNG infrastructure. However, the global supply tightness and the lack of long-term contracts make this a challenging endeavor. To address these challenges effectively, we call for the immediate passage of the Philippine Downstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act and the Midstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act. This legislation will provide the framework to attract the right investors, ensure transparent pricing mechanisms, and establish cost-saving measures that protect consumers from market volatility. Today's event has underscored the importance of collaboration. It is only by bringing together experts from government, industry, academia, and civil society that we can synergize efforts for a well-balanced and more secure and affordable energy future. In closing, I want to emphasize that our discussions today should be continuing collaboration. We must continue to work together, leveraging LNG to bring our current energy needs while paving the way for a sustainable and cost-effective future. Our goal is clear: to provide every Filipino with reliable, affordable energy that supports both economic growth and environmental sustainability. Carlos Aboitis and NEA Administrator, I think somehow put it together, mentioned that the most expensive power is the power that is not there. And hopefully, we will be able to bridge that by working together. Thank you once again for your participation and commitment. Let us move forward with a shared vision of an energy-secure Philippines. Good morning po sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much, Attorney Kit Belmonte. And with that, we conclude today's event. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we hope to see you again in our future fora. So have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.